Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, so if you want to grab a pizza and cookie refill, I would strongly recommend the cookies, and the more you have, the less that I am going to have after the event. So I would encourage you to have as many cookies as your pockets will hold. But we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Okay, so welcome everybody. Actually, can we get the music? Although it's very funky, I like it. Welcome everybody, and thank you very much to everybody for coming. And I know this is a really busy time of the year, but it's also the time of the year that I think is the most appropriate for speaking about some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So thank you very much for everybody that is here today. Like we do for any event in Richmond Hill, we would like to start with our land acknowledgement. We are gathering on lands that have been home to First Nations people from time immemorial. We acknowledge that what we now call Richmond Hill is on the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Mississauga and Chippewa nations of the William Treaty. We also recognize that we are on part of the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat. We would like to acknowledge all First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people from across North America, also known as Turtle Island, who reside in the city of Richmond Hill. We are committed to rebuilding constructive and cooperative relationships. I think it's probably a good moment for me to also mention, if as you're leaving today, or if you want to come back at another time to our Richmond Hill Center for the Performing Arts, out in the lobby we have a really great exhibition right now on art that was created from one of our treaty partners, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and council was very lucky, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, to have Chief Claire Salt and one of the councillors from the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Irma Farrell, also here with a number of the artists to open up the art display. It really is great, and it really does speak a lot to the kind of the history and the getting to know our treaty partners. So I'd encourage you to do that. So I'm really excited here to be here today, and I know this is our second time with this panel, or with a panel, and thank you to the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. But I've been practicing that, so if you could come up with a slightly less long name, that would be great, but if you don't, it's okay. But I really do appreciate your participation in both of these events, and I'll introduce the panelists in a minute. But suffice it to say, at this moment, we have a really great panel of experts on the stage here, and we're eager to get started. First, a couple of housekeeping things. This event is being recorded, so I would ask that you also silence your devices for the next hour. Tonight we're going to discuss the topic of local food growth in relation to the broad themes of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals with a panel of subject matter experts. We will be addressing questions submitted by the attendees, and I want to thank those that did also submit questions online. I would also first like to acknowledge my council colleagues that are here today. Thank you very much to all of you for coming out and supporting this as well. Deputy Mayor, Regional Local Councillor Godwin Chan is here. Councillor Karen Silvitz is here. Councillor Simon Tree is here. And is there anybody else on council? Okay, if you think you're on council, put your hand up. Okay, I don't see any. Okay, and anyway, thank you very much, folks, for coming out. I'm not sure whether we've got members of our provincial or federal representatives here yet, but they were planning on dropping in at some point. So I would also like to acknowledge somebody that's become a very good friend of mine and somebody who works in our building, Professor Kave Madani, who is the director of UNU INWEH. He works just upstairs, so whenever he wants to talk to me, he just knocks 3 times on the ceiling, like that song says, right? So this is really an interesting topic tonight, and it's been something I've been interested in for quite some time. How do we grow food locally, and what can our community do to do that, and how does that relate to sustainability in our environment and sustainability in our community? So that's really kind of the broad topic today. I was getting on the elevator day before yesterday, I guess, and one of the Rohit, was it you that told me that yesterday was the International Day for Sustainable Gastronomy? Did you know that? Did everybody? It was just me that didn't know that, because it was. So it was a very timely thing, and it was on the same day yesterday at council that we introduced a motion to strengthen some of our urban agricultural policies and practices, and we'll talk a little bit about that later today as well. So it's growing season for sure here in Canada, and with food shortages and food scarcity, I think there really is a need for more awareness and interest in growing food in general. As I said yesterday, we received the staff report unanimously endorsed by York Region, unanimously endorsing the York Region Food Charter Action Document. And this is not the only thing that we're doing with regard to this in Richmond Hill. Our strategic plan prioritizes the health of the city's population and the natural environment. And as I said yesterday at council, my vision and wish for Richmond Hill is to have much more urban agriculture than we have now, but certainly as much as possible. And the ability to create and grow local food connects people and supports our sustainability metrics program, our environment strategy, and action items, and also even our official plans. So these are all things that we're working on and that we value. These efforts also recognize the importance of local food in urban agriculture. It would be my hope that we can weave agricultural practices from Indigenous communities to further our education and best practices. And on Tuesday, at the launch of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation exhibit that I was talking about earlier, which I would encourage you to take a look at. We did actually enjoy a bowl of Three Sisters soup, and if you've never had Three Sisters soup before, it's really quite lovely. So there's lots of learning that I think that we can take on in here in Richmond Hill from Indigenous people as well. They certainly know a lot about that type of stuff. So we also have Richmond Hill declared as a front-runner city at the Urban Economy Forum. We recognize for a strong alignment with the program's objectives of fostering a sustainable urban environment and urban development here in Richmond Hill. And I think we've also become and continue to be leaders in innovation, sustainability, and economic growth, positioning the city as a model at local, national, and international levels. So, and also the adoption of sustainable development is an effort that takes engagement from all of us. Citizens, organizations like the UNU, INWEH, the York Region Food Network, and other grassroots organizations, like that, some of which are here tonight as well. With this panel of experts before me, we certainly are going to hear perspectives and learn about actions that are being undertaken in our city, in our region, and internationally to provide both education and inspiration. And, and also, this is not a destination, it's a journey. So there's going to be lots of things that I'm hoping bringing all of you together and bringing these organizations together will spawn different ideas and that we can use on this journey that we're on. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. Here tonight representing the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, or UNU INWEH for short. We welcome Dr. Rohit Ramchandani. I think I said that better this time than last time. All right, good. He's an accomplished researcher, educator, advisor, business leader, and implementation scientist who has dedicated over 2 decades of designing, managing, evaluating, and scaling health innovations for population-level impact. Operating as a systems catalyst at the intersections of multiple sectors, he has assumed key leadership roles in multiple life-saving interventions. At UNUINWEH, Dr. Ramchandani's work focuses on innovation, partnerships, and bridging the science policy gap to increase awareness of urgent global challenges and, more importantly, their solutions. So welcome and thank you for making the time to be here for this important conversation. Next, at the very far end, is Krista Lynn from the City of Richmond Hill as the natural event coordinator with Urban Forestry, Natural Environment, and Horticultural team. She currently manages environmental community programs such as the Community Garden Program, Healthy Yards, and the Richmond Hill Blooms. Her work focuses on interacting with the residents of Richmond Hill to offer education and engagement opportunities to promote environmental interest, as well as programs that increase the city's biodiversity, urban canopy cover, and access to local food. She went to the University of Toronto, where she received her Bachelor of Science focusing on biodiversity and conservation biology, and a Master's of Environmental Science. We are fortunate to benefit from Krista's experience at the City of Richmond Hill. And Krista, I want to thank you very much for being here tonight. And finally, representing the York Region Food Network, it's my pleasure to introduce Executive Director Kate Greavette. Always in awe to see the power that food has in bringing people together. Kate has worked at the intersection of food and community development since 2009. Kate's background in urban agriculture, post-harvest processes, and food policies, and her love of food growing and cooking aligns with her role of Executive Director of York Region Food Network and co-chair of the York Region Food for Learning. Welcome to the conversation, and thank you for being here, Kate. So again, thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here this evening. Tonight we're talking about the potential impact that growing food locally can have on sustainability. This is a very, very big topic, but I'm interested to explore it together. So let's get started. We are here to consider the implications and impact of what growing food means locally as Richmond Hill residents, but also to the broader global community. So I'll ask Rohit to start us off with his perspective and thoughts.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mayor West. So on behalf of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, UNU INWE, a little bit easier, INWE, let me begin by just extending our sincere gratitude to Mayor West and the City of Richmond Hill for their warm welcome and continued partnership. It's an honor to be here today in a city that is so committed to sustainability. And that's also one of the reasons why our institute is so proud to be headquartered right here in the City of Richmond Hill, and also to be working with the city through a partnership for sustainability transitions, a forward-looking collaboration that is supporting the advancement of sustainability strategies and looking at kind of global municipal partnership and what that can look like. I'll start by sharing a little bit about who we are as an organization, what we do, particularly with regard to our theme today on local food. So UNU INWE is one of the few UN entities headquartered here in Canada. We've been hosted by the Government of Canada since 1996, but relocated to Richmond Hill actually just last year. We are one of 13 institutions around the world that make up the United Nations University, which is the academic and research arm of the UN system that works to bridge evidence, policy, and practice. And INWE, we focus on tackling humanity's most complex challenges at the water, environment, and health nexus. And we've been doing that for almost 3 decades with our work spanning high impact research and innovation, education and capacity building, as well as policy impact and advocacy. And while we focus on the broader water, environment, and health nexus, we're often referred to as the UN's kind of dedicated think tank on water. And that's because, I think we recognize that water, while fundamental to life itself and a key driver of development, it remains central to the interlinked challenges that are encompassed in these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, right? The reality is that water doesn't exist in isolation. And it is a connector that is inextricably linked with the food that we grow, the energy that we produce, and the health of nature and ecosystems, of which we are, of course, a part. It's really the hidden driver behind nearly every meal that we eat. And that's why food, land, and biodiversity are also a core thematic focus for our strategic areas of work. And yet, globally, on average, our existing food systems consume approximately 70% of the planet's fresh water. They degrade soils and are increasingly vulnerable to climate shocks. And so in this paradox lies both a crisis and an opportunity to redesign food systems that are water smart, that are soil smart, that are equitable, and that are resilient. And so at UNU Inway, we take a systems approach to the challenge of food in order to guide smarter decisions across sectors and countries. And we do that by informing policy frameworks and working with 193 different member states. We shed light on novel innovations and nature-based solutions through research and scientific diplomacy. And we train the next generation of practitioners, researchers, and policymakers to lead this transformation. So I'll pause there. I look forward to our discussion tonight. And once again, thanks to my fellow panelists, all of you in the audience tonight, and all of my amazing colleagues who I hope you have a chance to connect with over the course of the evening.
No, thank you very much, Rohit. And actually, that's a good point. In getting to know the folks at Inway a bit better, in meetings that I've had since you've been here, the depth and breadth of understanding that's collectively existing on the 7th floor of our building is just enormous. And it is really, I'm very proud that you're here in Richmond Hill, and all the colleagues that are here tonight. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks very much, Rohit. And next, I'd like to hear from Krista, who is really on the front lines of so much of what we're doing around this topic in Richmond Hill. So, Krista, if you can give us some perspective on the topic.
It's already on? Oh, okay. Sorry, the topic, sorry, can you say one more time?
just if you can just give us kind of an understanding of what the, what's going on in Richmond Hill with regard to urban agriculture and so on, and some of the things that you're working on.
For sure, thank you. And thank you for hosting this today. I got really excited when I saw the topic of local food. It's something that's really special to me since I run the community garden program, which has been around since 2017, which was when the policy was passed by council. But since then, the program has really taken off, and that's, I think, what's really exciting. So basically, I run the community garden program. It includes both managing the allotment garden, and then we have the collective gardens. We have 9 now, which is really exciting. We started off with 3 before the pandemic, and then we had a little bit of a pause, and then since then, it's really taken off. But I think that the main thing, yes, we are still producing local food. A lot of our collective gardens give back to the community by donating a lot of their produce that come each year. I think this year alone, we've probably done over 1,500 pounds of produce that was donated back to the community, which is really great. But beyond that, I think there's also the sense of community, kind of on the local scale. We do have quite a few scales here that we found out all of our speakers are coming from. But for us, we're more on the local scale. So we have the local food portion of it, but we also have the sense of community, sense of being able to meet other people, being active, all the other great benefits that really come from it too. So that's kind of what we're doing here in City of Richmond Hill. But yeah, it's like a special love of mine. It's kind of like my baby. Oh, okay. But no, this program is definitely near and dear to my heart.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Krista. And I will say that the work that you talked about the food that's grown and donated, and we have so many great groups in Richmond Hill. I mean, two of them are here tonight. Richmond Hill Garden and Horticultural Society. I was coming to Cover Notes the other day, and that garden that's just over here, like that's not maintained by the City of Richmond Hill. That's maintained by the great folks at the Hort, and all the Hort people in their yellow shirts were there doing that, and it's a great garden, lots and lots of pollinating flowers and plants, so thank you for that. And I also just wanted to give a shout out to the Kids Right to Know garden, which also is at the back here. And this is a group that, I mean, pretty much all of the great things that I would value in building a strong, vibrant, socially connected community are checked in boxes that gardens like that do, and organizations like Kids Right to Know. And Krista, I know that your group is the one that helps to facilitate those kinds of community gardens. So thank you very much. Gardening is growing food, and it's all that other stuff, but it's also a whole bunch more too in a place like the City of Richmond Hill. So thank you. So thank you very much for that. And now I'd like to pass it over to Kate from the York Region Food Network, and a very big and important part in raising awareness and talking a little bit about local food.
Thank you, and I have to say it's really exciting to be here, especially since Richmond Hill Council did endorse the York Region Food Charter yesterday, and it's a really big, exciting document for us. So York Region Food Network, we are a charitable organization, and we've been working across York Region for nearly 40 years now. And what we do, and I guess for us at York Region Food Network, food is culture. It brings people together, it is welcoming, it's inclusive, and it's a way that everyone can be part of the community. And for us, what we see is a lot of people, unfortunately, in Richmond Hill and across York Region don't have access to food. And it could be that they don't have access to the land to grow food. They may not have access to money for seeds. We find some folks don't have access to refrigeration or even a house to cook food. And at the end of the day, a lot of people aren't able to afford foods. So what we do as an organization is we try to really bring together all of the various components and complexities of food. We know food is health, but we also know that it is vital for economic development, environmental sustainability, for education, for culture. So what we do at the program level is we run services that provide fresh food access. So this is working with local farms. We run a gleaning program where we can get local foods to people, or even better is sometimes we can get people out to the farms so they can harvest food, meet the farmers, and see where it comes from. We run affordable food markets, one right here in Richmond Hill, actually, which happens twice a month. We run good food boxes, community meals as well. But then on the other sides, we do run programs that actually offer opportunities for people to build skills around food. So these are garden programs, and we have the pleasure to work with the City of Richmond Hill on some, but it's also community kitchen classes. It's spaces where people can come and they get to experience food together. And these are spaces where we have every age, every background, multiple languages who come, and they're able to get to know each other, get to know neighbors, build friendships through food. So those ones are really powerful programs to really build those community connections, but also we've been able to develop enough skills that people can get references from us. They're able to get other jobs in the community as well. And then on the third kind of pillar to our work is really around the systems change. What we find is there's incredible work happening in food across the region, but everyone's working in silos. So what we're trying to do through the York Region Food Council, through things like the Food Charter, is try to break down those silos, getting people talking to each other, coming up with common values, so we can all work together towards long-term goals and long-term change in the community. So for us, it's really about getting community engaged in food, connected to food, exposed to it, but it's also about changing how we as communities interact with food, how we see it, to make sure that we have really coordinated actions as we go forward.
No, that's great, Kate. Thank you very much. It's amazing. Like, just in the beginning of this conversation now, it kills me how much food is really not just about eating and sustainability of our bodies, but it's about almost everything that touches our lives. So we're starting to have these conversations in a broader sense, I think, too. There is a greater understanding, partly through organizations like your own, too, that are helping to raise awareness of that. So, okay, so I want to make sure that we get as many of the conversation and questions that have come to us in tonight. So let's just jump right into it. So what I would suggest with the panelists is if you've got something that you would like to add, feel free to do so. But if if it's not really your area of expertise or whatever, and don't feel you have to. But the first question is, what is an example of a project that your organization is working on that is linked to the food space? So, if somebody want to kick that off? Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, I can dive right in just with some of the local examples. So some of the initiatives that we're working on in Richmond Hill and across York Region is one is the affordable fresh food markets. So this is what we're trying to do is when food is too much money for people to go to the grocery store and access, what we're trying to do is create markets where we can make that food much more affordable. So what we do is we work with local farmers, distributors. We get fresh food, freshly harvested, but it's the cabbages maybe that are a little too big or small for the grocery stores. It's the not kind of like misshapen carrots, for instance, that sort of stuff. But what we're able to do is then get it out to community. And we run a market here in Richmond Hill and across 6 other communities in York Region. But we're able to offer this food at prices from 25 cents to usually $2.50 or $3. So it's an avenue that people can access local foods, foods where we can say exactly where they came from, who the farmer was, and how they're grown, but in ways that are actually attainable for them. So it changes how we think about food access. It reduces stigma associated with charitable food, for instance, and then it creates that space for local food to be available to every member of our community. So that's one avenue we're doing. And then we're also working on a food system report card, which is more of that systems lens of trying to figure out how our food system how it's running right now and figure out kind of those rooms for that opportunity for improvement as we go forward.
No, that's great. I like the term misshapen carrots. I mean, I'm thinking, what does that mean? But I think that's something that we're starting to. There are segments of the kind of the food industry or the food space that people are starting to understand that I mean, it's not like it tastes any different. It's just a different. It was working around something when it was growing or something. Anyway, so what are some of the broader... Sorry, Rohit, did you have something to add to that? No, go ahead.
Well, you read this question first,
Okay.
because
right.
it'll introduce
No problem.
the program I've
Okay.
been talking about.
What are some of the broader system-level considerations we should be thinking about when it comes to food? That's a big one.
Yeah, so I can start. So I mentioned earlier that agriculture is by far the largest user of fresh water globally, and predominantly that's for irrigation. And its impacts kind of ripple across economies and ecosystems and human well-being. So that's, I think, a good place to start, because I think water is kind of a great pathway to thinking about these broader systems level challenges. So we can, for example, think about the simple fact that to grow food, you need land and water. But it's not just the land itself, it's how we use it. It's not just about the water, it's about how we manage it. And so these inputs link to energy, they link to labor and biodiversity and to health. And food systems issue at every level. These issues happen at every level. So globally, the stakes are really high. When we talk about health, nearly 1 in 10 people are undernourished internationally. That means they aren't consuming enough calories to maintain a normal, active, healthy lifestyle. And this indicator, this undernourishment indicator, is one of the leading measures of food security that's used by the UN. And it's a leading risk factor for death and other poor health outcomes, particularly in women and children. And that's why we've set a global target as part of the SDGs to end hunger by 2030. But while the world has kind of progressed over the past decades, we're far from reaching the target, with food security and malnutrition actually worsening in many regions. And several factors, including conflict, economic instability, extreme weather events, and climate shocks are what are hindering progress on meeting these objectives. This leads to, like you were saying earlier, rising food prices. So we're seeing that even locally here in Richmond Hill. Disrupted supply chains, unpredictable rainfall. There's a famine going on right now in Sudan, with about half of the population, that's like 25 million people, facing extreme hunger. And the UN has also warned of extreme and imminent risks of famine in a number of other places, like Gaza, South Sudan, Haiti, the Sahel region of Mali and Burkina Faso, along with other serious food crises that are happening around the world. So I think, viewing and understanding the interconnections that exist at a systems level, conflict, climate change, access to markets, these are all pathways to making kind of better and more sustainable decisions about the design of our food systems. Another example is food productivity, based on land and labor inputs. And so, I mentioned that 1 in 10 people are undernourished globally. Well, in sub-Saharan Africa, that figure is more than double. It's 23%. And part of this is because labor productivity and land productivity, or like crop yields, are among the lowest in the world. And that matters because more than half of the labor force works in agriculture. And most people living in extreme poverty are farmers. And so when entire families are needed just to work on the land for subsistence, there's no time or resources to dedicate, right, for education and job diversification or mobility into kind of higher wage sectors. And so it keeps them trapped in poverty. Crop yields in sub-Saharan Africa are also very low. And so if we take, a comparison between South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, since 1980, both regions have increased their cereal production significantly. That's an example, right? But in South Asia, nearly all of that growth came from their ability to create higher yields, right? So by individual farmer. While in sub-Saharan Africa, it came from doubling the amount of land that was being used to produce that. So the environmental cost is clear, right? More land cleared, more deforestation, more biodiversity loss. Projections show that if crop yields don't improve, cropland area could triple by 2050, resulting in the loss of 10 to 20% of animal habitats. So, understanding these broader connections, I think, are very important for improving our food systems and thinking about sustainability. And so the systems lens is what we really try and focus on in a way.
Thank you very much. Do you guys want to take a crack at that? You're good? If I may, I'm actually, in my family, I'm the first generation of Wests that don't live on a farm. And I remember, as a young kid, my grandparents had a fruit farm in the Niagara area. And it was great. I mean, we loved going there, especially in September when the peaches and everything, the apples and everything was coming ripe. But, one of the things I'll never forget, and I didn't really think too much of it at the time, was, seeing my grandpa come in with the tractor, and he'd been spraying. And, he was covered in it, right? The amount of spray and pesticides and so on that they would apply to the crops was just unbelievable, right? And particularly things like peaches, because there weren't that many varieties of peaches that were resistant to pests and all that kind of stuff. But and this is kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I think we really need to change our view of what a vegetable or piece of fruit looks like, right? It's okay for the apple to have the odd little scab on it. It's not causing any difference in the quality of the apple. And I remember actually that he would sell a lot of his peaches to different buyers, but the ones that he would keep back and have to sell out of his garage, were things that had like the most minute little flaws, and they sure tasted good, and but they weren't sellable to the the grocery stores or whatever, because they weren't like the perfect Picasso or Rembrandt version of what the fruit should look like. So anyway, I have to wonder if we've made progress since that time. I think we probably have, but there's probably more, given what you were talking about with crop yields and so on. Okay, so the next question, how can we increase the support of local farmers, as it's an essential safety net for our future financially, environmentally, and socially? And this was a question from Mary Lou Spinney. And one of the she goes on to say that we are fortunate to be capable of producing much of our food needs within an hour and a half drive from Richmond Hill, and yet most farmers markets are not very busy. Local farmers drive past Richmond Hill to downtown Toronto to sell their goods. Can we change this? So are there other supports that we can give to local farmers to encourage them to sell to our local communities?
This is such a good question, and I have to say, I think it's a tricky response. So on the one side, when we look at farming and agriculture, right now the whole sector is, I would say, going through quite a crisis. We have an average age of farmers, which is nearly 60. We have really poor succession planning happening on farmland as well. So we are seeing farmland being sold because it could be the younger generations of the family don't want to be farming. And so you sell the land, and that's kind of the retirement plan. So I think there's a lot we have to do around just farming itself and supporting the agricultural industry. And this is really everything from education in classrooms around agriculture as an actual viable profession, to then creating supports that people can get into farming. Because right now, especially in this area, accessing land is like the biggest challenge that people have. There are a few incubator sites across York Region. But again, it's getting a piece of land that's more than a quarter acre, half acre to grow. It can be really challenging, especially when you're adding in the infrastructure, the refrigeration, and all those other needs that you have. So a lot has to happen. And at the regional level, there is work happening in economic development around agriculture and agri-food, and helping to create some of those pipelines for all of this. But it definitely is a concern, and I think we really have to do a lot around trying to encourage younger people to get into agriculture. And then just from the farmers market side of things, I in kind of my former life, I was working on farms, did a lot of farmers markets and kind of post harvest work as well. And farmers markets are such amazing places, and they do so much for community building. They're vibrant. The education around food and opportunities is great. They're also just a ton of work, and if they're not economically viable for the farmer to be at, they will. They do have to go where the markets are bigger. So I think on the one side, it is creating the supports for the farmer, but on the other side, it's trying to build the customer base at those farmers markets. So farmers want to be there because if they're only going to make a couple $100s in sales, when you factor in their time prepping everything ahead of the market and then being there, they're actually losing money. So it's really about creating vibrant community spaces where community wants to go to. So then you have that customer base for sales. And then I think the other thing is communities like Richmond Hill, farmers markets are very traditional in a lot of ways, and we have a really multicultural community. So it is about trying to add in all those other components so everyone feels welcomed to come and everyone feels included in those spaces.
No, thank you very much. You guys want to take a shot at that?
Sure. I think there's a couple of different things that we've seen just globally, in terms of just how to do some of these things. I think one, just elevating, the visibility and the value of local food. So this means kind of investing it might mean investing in better signage, storytelling, and just public awareness. People support what they understand and feel connected to. So, I think if we can showcase farmers not just as vendors, but as kind of essential stewards of the land, of nutrition, and of local economy, that framing shift kind of can make a big difference. I think we can make it easier and more rewarding for local farmers to sell here, like you were saying, and that might mean kind of rethinking market locations and schedules and the fees, of course, for them. It can mean public-private partnerships, right? And so how we can help with subsidies for logistics or promoting kind of loyalty programs for local food shoppers. These are models from other municipalities. We can also look at how municipal policies, school boards, and healthcare institutions can be allies, right? So can we commit to sourcing more local foods for school lunches or for hospitals and city-run facilities? Can we embed local food systems in our procurement practices and not just kind of at this personal level? So these kinds of policies and strategies are some of the ways that I think we can support local farmers.
Yeah, I would also, suggest that locally grown produce is actually an economic development thing, as Kate, as I think you'd said earlier. And I mean, like a lot of the, really high-end restaurants are actually growing some of their own ingredients, which I think is really, it's an opportunity for local businesses to get into that business. And, I know that, when I was, a number of years ago when I was first on council, we looked at opening up a farmer's market right here at the theater. And, it opened up and it did okay for a little while, but then it kind of didn't get restarted the next year, and then the city took it over, and we moved it to another location, and it kind of lasted for a little while, and then it didn't. The one at the Hillcrest Mall, I don't believe that's there anymore, but it's still there. Okay, good. That's really good. But one of the things I think is, I think we've learned through that, and I think this was mentioned too, is location, right? And with the development of the Dave Barrow Square at Yonge and Major Mackenzie, I think those are the types of spaces where I think we could re-energize that and try that again, because I think there is a demand in our community for people wanting to buy local produce, but we need to make sure that we have an opportunity for them to do that. And I will say, I mean, I'm sure many of us, at least if not most, have been to farmers markets, and the creativity that goes into the products is really quite unbelievable. It really is an experience more so than just, again, nutrition. It's a bunch of other things too. So, okay. So Karen Dre asked, what would be the changes in society behavior that would benefit sustainability the most? That's probably a really big question, but who wants to take a shot at that? Krista?
I can take a shot. I feel like a lot of the questions are a lot more broad, so I kind of speak more on the local perspective. Since we do work really closely through the city, we work really closely with the community. So a lot of what we kind of implement is a lot of education and awareness, just from speaking with the community and kind of just going out to events and anything like that. We find that a lot of it is just a lack of awareness. So people might not be aware of different ways that they can live a bit more sustainably, or what they're doing might have some sort of impact. But once they find out, there's almost this change already. The eagerness is there. At least that's what I've noticed. And then going beyond from that, I find that every little small contribution really works. I know there's a lot of great policies that really shape all those smaller actions, but then kind of working with the community through education, like we do with workshops, stuff like that, info sheets, just ways to get people engaged and get them to kind of be more aware, I find adds up to something really big in a broader sense. So from the local perspective.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Rohit?
Sure. So as a public health practitioner, a lot of my career has kind of focused on how to shift population level behaviors, particularly in a kind of global health context. So whether that's improving access to treatments for childhood diarrhea, or anti-malarial medicines, or shifting agricultural practices, the thread running through all of these is behavior change, right? So of individuals, communities, and the systems around us. And so a lot of what our training brings to the table is a look at behavioral sciences. So how can we apply behavioral sciences and systems thinking to shift some of those behaviors? So to structure that idea, I can just briefly introduce a framework that we're working on right now, and that's called the BCOM framework. And that framework is a behavioral science framework that basically says, in order for people to change behaviors, there three things kind of need to be in place. One is the capability, right? So do people have the physical and psychological skills to carry out that behavior? Two is opportunity. That's the O in BCOM. Does their environment, the social and physical environment, support the behavior? And then third is motivation, right? So are they more motivated to do it than to not do it, both consciously and subconsciously, right? So now when we apply this to sustainability, we can start to see where the gaps are and how to close them. So I think one of the most impactful behavioral shifts that we can make as a society is to redefine what enough looks like, right? So for decades, we've been conditioned to kind of associate success with accumulation, more stuff, more speed, more convenience. But that mindset is also driving environmental degradation, social isolation, public health challenges. And so what if we shifted from a culture of excess to one of sufficiency and stewardship and shared well-being? And so in practice, this can look like, eating differently, fewer ultra-processed and resource-intensive foods, more local and plant-based meals that nourish and regenerate the land. Moving differently, right? So walking, cycling, taking public transport, not just to cut emissions, but to reconnect with our neighbors and our environments. Consuming differently, right? Valuing durability and repair over disposability and choosing experiences over material goods. So these are, individual shifts, but those, of course, aren't enough. We need systems also to make sustainable behaviors easy and accessible and socially supported. And so that means designing cities where people, might not need a car to live well, or creating policies that reward, some more low-impact lifestyles. And so, kind of returning back to this BCOM model and this concept of capability, opportunity, and motivation, let's build capability through education and skills. Let's expand opportunity, right, through better infrastructure and incentives and policy. And then let's strengthen motivation, right, for connecting people to purpose and identity and to each other. Yeah.
Kate, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I think one of the major avenues to deliver these messages and to see this shift is really like institutions really practicing what they preach around some of this. So one example is I do a lot of work with student nutrition programs in the region, and it could be as simple as buy local apples, and that's what kids are eating in the classrooms, and having those messages and those educations as well. But I think for us, there's so much purchasing that happens, especially from taxpayers' dollars, which aren't going back and supporting environment. They aren't going back and supporting any social impact in the community. And I think there's a real avenue and opportunity for institutions, governments, school boards, hospitals, to really put the dollars into creating this change and really role modeling what we want to see around this in our communities.
No, that's great. As an elected official at a local level, which is where I really enjoy being, everything kind of happens at the local level, right? And that's where the rubber meets the road, as my father would say. But I think that, there are some really big changes happening in cities like Richmond Hill, and we're certainly not the only one. But I mean, we are quickly becoming a much more urban place. And I mean, as our late mayor, Dave Barrow, used to say, and I will always remember this because it's a great line, is that, our mission here is to build a city inside of a town. And, I think a lot of the really big game-changing things that will happen, not just in Richmond Hill, but in other suburban-built cities, is this move towards a more compact, environmentally sustainable, walkable, transit-oriented community. And, big things like the subway, I mean, man, it's been a long time coming, but I mean, it will get here, and we need that, and we need it very, very soon. And it's not just the subway; it's all kinds of other, mobility type improvements, transit improvements. Moving us away from needing to get in the car every single time we need to go get anything, right? And we're working on micro mobility strategy, and we need to figure out a way to have scooters and e-bikes and all those other types of new technologies also working in harmony with pedestrians, right? And both the pedestrians and the e-devices staying away from cars, right? So that everybody can choose the different modes of transportation. But also, the mode of transportation that's probably the best for all of us is to walk, right? Get out, be healthy, get your exercise and all this kind of stuff. And I think those are the kinds of things that, while the process of getting there is, kind of painful, to be honest with you. I mean, and as we progress with development, we do get conflicts with people not really understanding what the big picture is. But I think at the end of the day, these are some of the things that will change change the way things have been, but for the better in terms of sustainability. So, hopefully we have time for a couple more questions, but the next one here: how can municipal governments, in collaboration with academic institutions, effectively integrate the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, into local water policy frameworks to ensure equitable access, sustainable management, and resilience of water resources in urban settings like the city of Richmond Hill? So I kind of think that I might have a role to play in that question, but does anybody else want to kick us off? Or are you going to leave it all up to me? Sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I would just say that that's kind of exactly the spirit behind, the growing partnership between the City of Richmond Hill and UNU Inway. Mm-hmm. Together we're working to bring kind of global insight to local impact, right? And so already, UNU Inway is contributing to Richmond Hill's sustainability plans by reviewing and enriching them with global evidence-based practices. We're looking at, we've had a chance to look at some of the sustainability strategies and just provide comment and feedback and case studies from international cases, drawing on examples from cities around the world that are tackling sustainability, in innovative and different ways in different contexts. We're also co-creating leadership partnerships or learning partnerships, and starting with this kind of SDG learning series. Through a joint initiative, Richmond Hill staff are going to gain access to an online course actually next week that looks at the introduction of the SDGs to cities and municipalities. So this is just the beginning of our work together. Globally and more broadly, there are lots of ways in which these types of municipal academic partnerships are happening. One would be kind of starting with data and diagnosis and kind of embedding the SDG targets into policy and infrastructure planning through specific measurable goals. Academic partners can provide an evidence base, systems modeling, cost cutting, cost benefit analyses to support these kinds of investments. One example would be partnerships between cities and local universities that have helped to test and scale remote sensing for flood management interventions. And we have colleagues doing this work in New York out of one of our UNU hubs focused on remote sensing for climate change. They are based at the City College of New York. We can build capacity and foster a culture of water stewardship. Some cities have partnered with academic institutions to create living labs, as an example. So real-world testing grounds where students, researchers, and local government staff can kind of co-develop and pilot new technologies and solutions. We have this happening at one of our UNU hubs on engineering for climate change based out of Hamburg at the Hamburg University of Technology in Germany. We can promote equity and participation, right? So we have work like this happening at our UNU hub that's focused on empowering communities to adapt to environmental change at the University of Calgary. And they're working with Indigenous communities and marginalized populations to really understand, from an end user standpoint, what are the strategies and interventions and innovations that are really going to work and meet the needs of, the people that we're trying to help. So yeah, just some examples.
No, thanks, Rohit. Kate and Krista, you want to take a shot at that? Okay, well, I'll just use, actually, you said a number of the things that I would have said as well, so thank you. But I think, one of the things in Richmond Hill that's, really important to remember is that, we basically are one of the significant water source for the Great Lakes, for Lake Ontario. And this is water that ultimately we're going to drink. So I think, the Oak Ridges Moraine is the rain barrel of Southern Ontario, and it really is. I've always felt that it's very, very important that we act as good stewards for that. So, the land that we have protected in the Oak Ridges area around the Oak Ridges Moraine, and we have a bunch of land in there protected under the Oak Ridges Moraine Act, that needs to stay protected, and it's there for an environmental purpose. But I think it's also really important that we have the environmental policies that we are protecting water, we're protecting our urban forest canopy, and it's under a lot of stress. We have invasive species that there's species living in our forests right now that have been there for so long now that I actually think that they're supposed to be there and they're not. So there's a lot of pressures here, but I think that part of the political will that is required in order for us to continue to do those kinds of things come from the public. So I think it's also really important to have, people understand, well, what is the rationale for doing the types of things we're doing to protect the environment? Because ultimately, when the public starts asking the politicians to make sure that they're doing the things that we all need to do around, water protection and around environment and around local food, because it's all very much connected. We have huge investments coming up in York Region in the next little while to, for water and sewer infrastructure. I think, we do a good job in treating the water both coming in and going back, but we need to continue to make sure we're having those investments. So, Kate, I see Kate here kind of telling me that it's 7 o'clock. I do want to ask just one more question, if I may. I always need to push it a little bit, This is, I wanted to just, we are really talking about on-the-ground stuff as well in this forum. I wanted to just get a sense, Krista, if you could, can you give us a little bit of an idea on what does it take to get a community garden going in Richmond Hill? What are the requirements? What spaces are available? What are our plans for the future with regard to community gardens?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So I think one of the biggest things to understand with the community garden program is that it's actually a very flexible program. We're not just trying to create these massive, large-scale vegetable gardens. We actually work with community groups, whether it's a nonprofit organization that already has some sort of organizational structure, or something smaller like 3 community members living in a local neighborhood who want to come together and create a community garden. And it's as simple as kind of creating that initial framework and coming together and reaching out to the City of Richmond Hill, and kind of putting in that application to show us that you're interested, to kind of, yeah, like start up a garden. And the flexibility is great because local food is what we do focus on, but we also do love to integrate, creating pollinator habitat, program support if it's at an existing facility. We do try to also use a lot of our underutilized spaces that fall in within the city. I know we do have a lot of like manicured green spaces that could probably be a lot better utilized to something a bit more active, but also giving back to the community, and also in like multiple ways. So there's a lot coming down the line. Just in the last 3 years alone, we receive multiple applications a year. So it's just a matter of going through it, trying to find that perfect spot for that garden, and then kind of making it happen. So yeah, it's a work in progress, but it's kind of always growing, which is really exciting.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just, I mean, to illustrate some of the things that you're specifically talking about, again, I'll just reference the Kids Right to Know garden. You know, it's just across the street from the Bayview Hill Community Center. And, you know, again, I don't mean to go on about this, but it was an area of lawn, essentially. Yeah. And now it's an area that's a way better habitat for any living creature. We're not cutting the lawn there anymore because it's a beautiful garden, and and it's bringing the community together. It certainly takes leadership to get a community garden up and running, but this community garden brings the community together. We were talking earlier. I mean, there's been indications from some of the people that work in that garden that they're there to combat loneliness. They're there to learn to meet their neighbors. They're there and none of those things have to do with gardening, but they're really valuable to the community. But then on the other side of the coin, I know Kids Right to Know was at the food bank in the fall with me to present, to be acknowledged for the food that they're growing for the Richmond Hill Food Bank. So all of this is happening, and if you ever get a chance to go over there and take a look at it, I mean, it's also a work of art, right? I mean, it really is quite beautiful, and there are a number of community gardens started up in Richmond Hill, and the number hopefully is it's growing, but hopefully it can grow even more, because for every piece of lawn that we don't really need it to do anything except cut the lawn every week, if it could be growing as a community garden, it would make the mayor very happy, but I'm sure it's also a real benefit to the community, and that's obviously the most important thing. So Kate, did you have anything to add about just kind of community gardening and the role that you see in your organization?
Well, I think you've nailed it. That community gardening, the power to it is it serves so many different purposes, and it is that food access, it's the community building, it's the education, it's the environmental piece as well, and that's just a few. So I think for us, we just see opportunities to continue to engage community garden networks, create those really easy avenues and opportunities for folks to access growing space. So Richmond Hill's doing such an amazing job, so amazing that we actually don't run any community garden programs in this city. We focus on some of the other municipalities that don't have the same support at the city level. But for us, it's about building those spaces again where you have education, and trying to create spaces where people can learn how to grow in different spaces. So if you are in a condo or an apartment building, what are your options? We've been looking and teaching and working with folks around sprouting. So even if you have no outdoor space, is there still ways that you can grow at home too? So I think for us, one of the real avenues is trying to work with people where they're at and the spaces that they have to figure out what avenues they have to start some of the stuff, and to really be empowered by it. Because from what I've seen, it doesn't matter if you're 2 years old or 85, like everyone's so excited when that seed germinates, and like it's just so powerful. So just to have that in the community in whatever form makes sense, it's just really truly magic.
Yeah, actually, and that's very true. I just want to be clear with regard to the community gardening piece. If you have any questions or anything like that, Krista's here, and her, she has a whole team of people that can. It's a small but mighty team, but certainly it is something that I would love to see more and more of in Richmond Hill as time goes on. So I think that's all the time we have for questions today. But I thank you very, very much. I hope everybody's enjoyed this today. And I do want to say a couple of thank yous as well. First of all, thank you to all three of you for sharing a very varied and very deep amount of understanding on this topic. So thank you very, very, very much. I want to thank all of the exhibitors that are here today. I really think this is great. I'm probably going to miss anybody, and my apologies if I do, but Climate Action Richmond Hill is here. Marta, thank you very much. The Horticultural Society is here. Thank you very much. As I said, Kids Right to Know is here. We have two booths from the City of Richmond Hill, and they're out all summer long at different parks and events that are happening. And so thank you to all of our city staff for doing that. And also the Plant-Based Treaty folks, who I had the pleasure of meeting, I think, in the first sustainability speaker series, and they've been here to participate with a booth, and they're an excellent organization too. And of course, Rohit and all of the people from the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. Thank you very much for being here. So I really hope, as I said, I hope you enjoy this event, and I really hope that everybody leaves today with a little bit of inspiration. And if you are inspired, please don't keep it a secret. Tell everybody you know that these opportunities are available in our town. I think it's success begets success, and I think it's really nice if people can go out and share with some of the good news that's happening here in Richmond Hill. So I think it is really important that if we're going to make the kind of changes that we need in our society, it really does start at a local level, and I think we are well positioned to do that. So thank you very much, everybody. Don't rush off if you want, and any cookies that are left, make sure you get rid of those before they're gone. Thanks very much, everybody.